Hey guys, it's Seamoose here with a patch rundown video. Now, I haven't made a video like this before, and it's something that I've seen in a lot of other games. For example, St. Vicious, a former professional League of Legends player, does this for League of Legends, and that's sort of where my inspiration is coming from. So we had a really big patch this past week that's released on both PC and now the console versions of Overwatch as well. And there's a lot of interesting things to talk about, so I figured I would make a video and then show you guys some of the important details. So jumping right into it. The first thing to note is that a new hero was released, Ana, who is a support sniper, a very cool concept, and a very good execution, honestly, of a hard-to-understand class. She is appropriately a 3-star difficulty rated hero, and she is certainly very impactful, but she has a lot of quirks, and she does take some time to get used to. So I'm going to have a basic guide for eventually all of the heroes, including Ana as well, but a few things to recognize is that Ana's healing is hit scan or projectile based. If it's her regular fire, she fires a very fast dart projectile that heals you over time, or also does damage over time to an enemy. And then if she goes into her scope mode, it's a hit scan projectile. The amount of healing or damage, it's 80 if I'm not mistaken, and isn't very significant, but it's good. And her other abilities are where she really becomes a super interesting hero. So her shift is a 6-second long sleeping dart, which is a skill shot based, very hard to hit projectile, but if you land it, it's 6 seconds of sleep, which is incredible. Huge amount of crowd control, the longest we've seen in the game so far. And so that the impact of that ability, even though the opponent's going to be knocked out of sleep if they're hit by damage, can potentially be very low, but it can also be potentially very high if she does hit someone like a Genji with his sword out and just completely nullify that. Her other basic ability is her E, which is a grenade that not only amplifies healing on herself as well as her allies, it also negates healing on enemies, and then it also heals a little bit. So it's a very powerful effect. It's probably one of the more unique and just cool abilities we've seen as far as basic abilities are concerned, and that's sort of the entire, I think, purpose of Ana was to be really awesome and really interesting, and I think that's certainly the case. Her last ability is Nano Boost, which makes your one ally faster, stronger, and takes less damage. And that's the first single target support we've seen, or single target support ultimate we've seen in the game. Most of them have the potential to hit many allies as opposed to just one, and that makes it really interesting because it's a very powerful effect, and it makes your ally, whoever you target, super strong. But on the other hand, the other supports are much stronger in the way that they have AoE abilities. So one thing I know that's really oftenly discussed in these sorts of patch rundown videos is whether or not the hero will be viable, whether or not the champion or the character will be viable, and it's going to take some time. But I think Ana is going to be a little bit on the lower end of the play rate, just because I think she is very hard to use. She's very situational too, and while her ultimate is strong, she's not like one size fits all like Lucio or the newly buffed Zenyatta is, or even to a certain extent Mercy is. I do think she has situational uses, and I do think she will see play, and she already has in some professional games, but it's not the kind of thing where, you know, if your team needs a healer, you go to Ana first, because you're going to probably want a stronger healer at first, a little bit more consistent healing. And for Ana, she's more of a very deep utility-based hero as opposed to just her ability to heal targets. So that's Ana. Like I said, that's sort of a brief introduction. I'll go over her more in some time. Let's take a look at some of the other changes that we've seen. So general updates-wise, gameplay-wise, overtime was modified a little bit. It now runs down much faster, which I think is great. I think overtime lasted very long, and a lot of people got really upset at it. And this is just a way to combat the fact that you used to be able to just, you know, throw tracers on there, soldier on there, just tap it one time, and consistently keep overtime up forever. I think one of the longest overtimes I've seen, this was back in the beta, was like over 2 minutes long, and it was refreshed maybe 17 times, 18 times. It was really long. So trying to make overtime a little bit less forgiving is, I think, a great idea to do, a great thing to do. And not only did Blizzard change the overtime, the rate at which it goes down, the fuse, they also increased the respawn timer for teams during overtime, which I think is really interesting, and that's something that Overwatch is a very, very unique game as opposed to most games that have existed. Obviously, it has some games, predecessors that it's based off of, but the way the respawn mechanic is studied throughout the game is unique, I think, compared to a lot of other games. And increasing the time that the respawn takes during a critical moment in the game, like during overtime, can make it much, much harder to consistently keep overtime up, which is, I think, the intention here, and I think that's, you know, fantastic. The next important thing to look at as far as general updates is concerned is that competitive play has a 1 hero limit. So we've been complaining about it for a long time. The competitive community loves the eggplant format, loves the 1 hero limit rule set, and Blizzard apparently has agreed with us. They changed the Atlantic Showdown rule set to be 1 hero limit stopwatch, and now they also changed the competitive rule set to be 1 hero limit, which I think is awesome. This is awesome not only because it's good for the players having to strategize around the potential 4 Zarya 2 Lucio composition and all the wacky things you can do with 0 hero limit is very, very frustrating to prepare against, but it's also good for the spectators, because the spectators, it's especially for new spectators, it's hard to follow when there's 4 Winstons jumping around on the map, putting down their bubbles with, you know, 4 Tesla cannons or whatever, and then just all the lights and action and stuff in Overwatch that makes the game fun and fast-paced and really cool can be a little bit extreme when there's no hero limit, and it can make it really hard to follow. It also makes it a little bit harder to balance when you have no hero limits, because certain things are stronger in duplicates or triplicates or quadruplicates, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, in 4s than they are when you're just running them as 1. Most notably Winston. Winston was super, super strong as 2, but he's more of a niche pick as 1. But anyway, Blizzard agrees with that. Thank you very much, Blizzard. I think it's a really good decision. Potentially in the future we'll come to a point where the game is balanced enough for 0 hero limits. Potentially not, but for now 1 hero limit is definitely the way to go. So a few other changes that don't really matter too much. Now let's get to the actual hero balance changes themselves. So general change, self-healing abilities can now charge ultimate abilities. That's good. That's new. That certainly helps out certain heroes that could heal themselves, like Soldier, for example. And there were a couple of nerfs to ultimate charge times, so that's probably another reason why. This also is a pretty big benefit to Roadhog, which you'll see had a pretty significant change in conjunction with this a little bit down the road. So let's take a look at Bastion. Okay, so 10% ultimate increase. Why was that? That's because he can heal himself. That's pretty fair. That, honestly, I don't think that'll make or break him. I think he's still a very niche pick, and I think Blizzard's okay with that. Having a turret hero as a mainstay in the competitive scene could be very, very annoying to play against. And we have still seen Bastion come up on certain maps occasionally, so I think this is fine. I still think he is on the slightly weaker end, but whether or not he actually needs buffs or deserves buffs at this point is debatable. Diva had some massive changes. So to me, Diva and Winston for a very long time, gameplay wise, have a similar role ever since Winston was changed. Winston's shield was reduced a little bit, and he was used much more instead of a tank as a disruptor to jump on the enemy team and just try and wreak havoc. He does have a shield, obviously, and is very tanky, but he isn't like Reinhardt, who is a frontline shield. Diva's defense matrix, however, was changed to make her less of a mobile character into more of a frontline defensive hero, and you'll see why. So the defense matrix was changed to have a 1-second cooldown, and it now has a toggle ability. It's your right click now as opposed to E, and it has a meter just like Pharah's does on the side of your crosshair. And while you have charge, you can use the defense matrix, just toggle it on or off. It's really, really powerful. It can last for a while, and the time it takes to charge is pretty fast, honestly. It recharges, so it takes 10 seconds to reach full charge. And that's basically, during that time, you can literally negate nearly anything. I mean, some of the only things you can't negate are like a Roadhog hook, for example, but this change makes Diva a fantastic frontline hero. She can keep her defense matrix up. It's going to be up for a very long time, honestly, even though the numbers look like they're kind of low. and she's going to be able to act as a much better frontline for her team as opposed to just running around disrupting, which is the niche she filled before. This change has made her much, much stronger in conjunction with a couple of other changes that we've seen on her, and has put her play rate up there to about equal with Reinhardt. Honestly, you'll see two tank compositions sometimes, Diva and Reinhardt, just because the frontline protection they both provide is so fantastic. Some other changes Diva received: her self-destruct was decreased the ultimate charge by 15%, so that just means you'll see the self-destruct faster. But the two really interesting changes here are, not only does she not take explosion damage from her ultimate, she also has the effect of the bomb, the detonation, reduced by 1 second. It's 3 seconds as opposed to 4. So it's much, much easier to land the ultimate since it happens so much faster. And I think there's also a potential bug where the animation and the sound effect of the Diva ultimate are actually still with the 4-second ultimate as opposed to the 3-second ultimate. So if you ever died to an ultimate and then you hear the sound go off like half a second later, that was probably because those still might not be aligned. Now that's anecdotally, and I've heard that through the grapevine, so I'm not 100% sure. I still need to test myself whether or not that's the case. But still, even with those changes, those are all essentially buffs. Diva has very much come into her own as a very strong character in the metagame. So Lucio receiving a 10% increase to his sound barrier doesn't really change much about him. That's just to combat the healing effect that self-heals now give you ultimate. And McCree got a small looking change, but had a very, very similar, very, very significant effect. So his left click now is much better at range because the fall off is farther away, and it reminds me of beta before, like the first few weeks when McCree didn't have any fall off damage at all because it's so extreme. This is a change to combat his weakness after his Fan the Hammer was nerfed pretty significantly. He wasn't a really strong hero, and I recognize that McCree definitely deserves some love, but I'm not sure if this was the way to go because his right click is still a pretty lackluster, not a great ability, and his left click now is super strong. And it's just like, I understand the intention. They wanted to make McCree stronger, and they certainly succeeded. He's very strong and probably the #1 DPS pick in Overwatch right now. But I think they changed the wrong aspect of his kit because his right click still feels very, very weak. You don't really flashbang right click someone because it's random and hard to hit and doesn't do much damage. You generally flashbang and then left click with a headshot because it's so good. At close range, like, that just goes to show you how like not effective his right click is. Now that his left click is on par with soldiers and does much more damage from the get-go, he is very, very powerful. So Mercy got a couple of changes. Her resurrect was increased by 30%. So that's pretty significant. The buff she got with that was that she is now able to get a reset on her shift, her dash, when she uses her ultimate, which is a nice change because generally you would see Mercy's waiting for their entire team to die. Then they courageously jump in with their shift and then use their Q, but they can't jump out in time and they're dead. So this is supposed to keep her a little bit more mobile, keep her a little bit safer, but they also changed the rate of her ultimate charge because it was so obnoxiously fast before. All in all, I think this isn't a change that'll make her entirely useless. I think she's still pretty strong, but I do think with the changes to the other supports and the inclusion of Ana, she will be less frequently used as she was before, which I'm okay with. I think both Lucio and Mercy were very, very common to the extent that they were the most common heroes in the game, and while supports are important and you should play with supports, that's kind of lame when you keep seeing the same one or two. So Roadhog got an ultimate nerf of 45%, or technically, well, the charge was buffed, but in a bad way, by 45%. I think most of that is honestly just to work on his self-healing now, because of course he builds ult charge. Go figure, a lot of heroes got adjustments to that. But 45% is still pretty significant. And I wonder if they just did that because Roadhog was becoming very common. He was sort of like the new McCree. McCree wasn't commonly used since ever since he had his right mouse button nerf on Fan the Hammer. And since then, Roadhog became the new McCree in the sense that he would have an ability, a crowd-controlled ability, that if it landed was nearly a guaranteed kill. And his ultimate is certainly very, very powerful and has the potential to not only do a lot of damage, but do a lot of utility as well. So after the change to self-healing charge, I think a change in this way is overall still a nerf, but not so significant. Like it'll be a decent nerf that'll probably bump his play rate down a little bit, but hopefully we'll still see the hog around. So the next change was to Soldier 76, and it was an interesting one and not one that many people expected. So basically, you might have seen on the subreddit, the Overwatch subreddit, there was a post about how players with a Soldier macro could have nearly perfect shooting without any sort of like delay. The burst fire, you fire it in bursts of 4 if I'm not mistaken, and then you just pause for an instant, and then you fire in bursts of 4 again, and then you have a nearly perfect stream of his bullets without actually having the recoil that Blizzard intended. And so to combat this, they have a spread recovery time that happens after a short delay. And honestly, the effect of the change, the nerf, makes him feel a little bit clunky. I know some players are very vocal about it. Personally, I'm on the I don't really see why they did it. Like I don't think he was that big of a deal. And I'd rather them change it back because it is certainly annoying. And considering McCree is buffed as well, his Soldier's use is going to decline as a result. Not super significantly. I still think he's okay. But McCree in most situations will probably be more useful than Soldier. And as well as that, his Tactical Advisor got a nerf by 10% of his ultimate increase charge. Same deal. You know, that's the change to healing. So let's look now at Zenyatta. And there are the notes that you guys can see yourself. And I absolutely recommend you all go and read through these patch notes yourself. I'll link them in the description of this video, since it's very important you make your own opinions and get all the information that you can. So there are the notes. I'll let you guys read through them in your own time. I'm just going to take a look at the changes to him, and the changes are numerous. The first change is that he has 50 more health, 50 more shields. This now puts him at a benchmark of 200 HP, which is a huge significant difference over 150 where he was at before, and makes him much more of a battle ready hero. He can actually be involved in battle as opposed to cowering for his dear life, where one headshot ability from pretty much anyone would insta-kill him. Not to mention that it's also shields, and shields are better than health because shields will regenerate over time. His other changes, so his right click and left click were homogenized. Right click did 10 damage less, even though it did charge, than the left click used to, and it was much, much less used because there really was no reason. The left click was faster, right click didn't add much. It honestly was a worse ability, so the alternate fire Zenyatta had wasn't used ever by players really. And by changing both of the damage values to 40, so from 45 to 40 and 35 to 40, it makes right click a much more attractive option if you're deciding as Zenyatta, should I shoot with a charge shot or should I shoot with just trying to fire out my orbs and land some damage. And I think it was a pretty good change. His Orb of Discord and Orb of Harmony were both changed in that their projectile speed was quadrupled, so from 30 to 120. And that is a massive, massive change, because it used to be that if you fire Discord and then fire an orb, just an Orb of Destruction, your regular left click, the Orb of the Discord, which you fired first, would be late. It'd be behind the orb. And that was pretty annoying. But now, because both Orb of Discord and Harmony are so freaking fast, they get to your targets instantly. And I think that buff, I think it's a good idea. You want to make Zenyatta a little bit more useful in that way, and certainly his orbs being so slow with such slow travel time were really, really frustrating as the Zenyatta player, but I think they might have done a little bit too much. That's just my opinion. Now, the biggest change to Zenyatta, in my opinion, is actually he had a lot of huge changes. So one of the big changes, since he did have so many, is Transcendence got buffed significantly. Not only was the healing increased from 200 to 300 per second, which is massive. That's like more than a Reaper ultimate and then some. His ability also gives him movement speed while he's using the ultimate. And I think the impact Transcendence used to have compared to the other support ultimates wasn't as significant, and I think it's totally okay for Blizzard to want to try and change that. So I agree with the 200 to 300 healing. Like, Transcendence is now a boss ability. Like, it is so freaking strong, and if you use it successfully, your opponents are just gonna be so mad at you and tell you that, you know, Zenyatta's a broken hero, whatever, and you should go stop playing this game or uninstall, etc. So that changes, I think, is fine. But the change that doubles his movement speed on activation, in my opinion, I hate that change. It's probably my least favorite change this patch. I think it was probably done to buff Zenyatta and buff the use of his ultimate. His ultimate's much faster now, but now that he's zooming around the track like a race car, it actually is a detriment to skillful Zenyatta players. Because to me, Zenyatta and using his ultimate properly, it was all about positioning perfectly so that way you can transcendence your allies if they're in trouble, but you play the game far away from the opponent normally. But now, positioning isn't really a big deal. There's no separation between great players and good players because Zenyatta can just mash Q and then he can go across the entire map just by using the movement speed buff. Whether or not Zenyatta's Transcendence needs a movement speed buff, personally, I don't think it does. I really liked when it was moving much slower and you just could see the skill of really well positioned Zenyatta players, but who knows. Either way, with all of these changes, Zenyatta is much stronger than he was before and is probably, I mean, I would say he's the second best support. It's close though. I would say the top 3 supports in this order would be Lucio, Zenyatta, Mercy, and then Ana's like kind of down there, and Symmetra's like super situational. But I think Zenyatta might be overtuned in some ways. I think Lucio is too. I think honestly the support class is still very strong, even though it has low representation. And to a certain extent it needs to be, because if supports are not impactful in this game, then everyone's going to be playing DPS, and that's super annoying. But you also don't want situations where the supports are so strong that people are just going to run supports and duplicates, which you can't do anymore, or try 4 support comps. Like, I work with the team, a professional Overwatch team. I guess we're not sponsored, but we made money, so we're professional. But I work with the team, and we were joking around making 3 or 4 support hero compositions. Now, as of right now, I don't think we're at that point, but I still wonder whether or not supports as a class are like a little bit too strong. Maybe. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, though, Zenyatta and his changes were very significant, and he's much more powerful now, and he's also pretty strong because he can dish out a lot of damage. So other than that, I think that was pretty much it as far as the changes are concerned. Yep, some bug fixes, which are always nice. Some payload bug fixes. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. I'm probably going to do a patch rundown video for every major patch we have. It's something that I've never done before, but I really like talking about this game, and I'm all about, you know, learning more about this game and discussing this game and just coming to a better understanding of this game. So being able to make a video like this, it's not like the gameplay videos that I've done in the past, but I definitely think I'll continue doing them in the future. Speaking of which, I have been out for a couple of weeks, and I really do apologize. My computer was broken for a very long time, and that basically disabled my ability to do any editing and really recording too. Like, I could record like horrible quality, but that wasn't worth. So to everyone who started watching, I apologize that I haven't been here, and I will definitely be pumping out content in the future. And the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is a discussion video, since there is a lot to discuss. There is the $300,000 E-League Overwatch tournament going on. There is the Atlantic Showdown still going on. There is Blizzard's responses and the way they've been discussing the future of the game and stuff. All the changes they've made recently. There are sneak peeks, like the hints about Sombra still, since Ana was released. And speaking of, there's still Ana's release to discuss. So tomorrow I'll make a Overwatch discussion video sometime, and then continue my Lucio guide into Monday, Tuesday, and so on and so forth. And then I'll be making videos daily for quite a while. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If y'all have any questions, feel free to let me know. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.